Okay, I'm Dave, I'm an alcoholic. Thanks Caleb for being here for me today and for sponsoring me, and thanks Don for sponsoring Caleb and always being here for me as well, and thanks to all of you guys for being here. What it was like, what happened, and what it's like now. I want to actually focus on what happened because it's a part of my story that I tend to rush through, and the last couple of years I've kind of not really explained what brought me back here to Scottsboro. So I'm going to start in February 2014. So what's that? That's 5 years ago. I just picked up my 18-month chip. I had done 14 months in treatment, 7 months up at the house, 7 months in the halfway house. So I was 18 months sober, right? No. I had picked up after 11 months. And for 7 months, I'd been lying to everyone. Pretending that I was still in recovery. I did a 1-year share. Now I picked up another substance, I didn't pick up alcohol. So in that share I somehow justified it to myself, well, I haven't drank. I mean, obviously I knew that I had relapsed, but it somehow made lying easier. And I continued with this substance for another 7 months. And I guess the point I can make about that is how dishonest I am, how deceptive I can be. It's amazing the lengths I will go to get what I want. And like 18 months of kind of compliance and then dishonesty was what I was willing to pay to get what I wanted. I mean, people started to notice that I wasn't okay, and my sponsor called me in because I wasn't attending as many meetings, and he tried to put me back on track, and we were going to meet regularly, and I was going to recommit to the meetings, but I felt like a bank robber who was about to get the knock on the door from the police and say, look, we got you. And I kind of manufactured this reason to go back to Johannesburg. And I left after 18 months. And I drank that first night. I was back in Joburg. My parents happened to be away. My aunt was house sitting, and I went out to a casino and I got drunk. That was the first time I drank for 18 months, but I've been using for 7 of them. And within 3 months, I was back in treatment. Yeah. I went to a treatment center up in Joburg. It's funny because on the morning I went into treatment, I went downstairs to my parents and I said, I need help. I've been drinking this whole time. I need to go to treatment. And they were shocked. They were like, but we've just been on this long family holiday. We thought you were fine. So you see, the 6 years previous, I've been in and out of treatment centers and relapsing and going back into treatment. I guess I had learned how to lie and control, or try to control, and how to mask, and to, I became very devious in my methods of controlling other people's perceptions of me. So anyway, I went into treatment. So this is June 2015. So yeah, up to that point, I've been up at the House on the Hill 6 times. I've been in treatment 9 times. So this is a guy who's been in treatment 9 times, still believing that alcohol was a solution. So where was my head at when I went into treatment up at Joburg? You see, I try to ask myself that. I had come to the conclusion that drinking got me in trouble. So it was like, well, I want to drink, but I can't, because whenever I drink, it's like there's consequences. And the truth is, on that morning, I went and asked my parents for help. If they had said to me, okay, Dave, we'll give you an apartment, we'll give you lots of money, and you can just continue drinking and we'll take care of you, I probably would have said yes, because I still wanted to drink, but the consequences of it were just too severe, and I couldn't handle that. I couldn't work, I couldn't maintain relationships. The dishonesty of keeping this lie alive was eating me up inside. No confidence, no self-esteem, no friends, an empty life. I love that expression. I had a God-shaped hole in my soul, a God-shaped hole in me. But at that point, did I think the solution was the program and God? Well, obviously not. And so I went into that treatment center. And I remember after 7 days, I wanted to RHT, refuse hospital treatment, and leave. Because I kept comparing it to the house on the hill. Oh, that's not right, and this isn't right, and you don't do this, and you can't do that. And I wanted to leave. And there was actually this guy who had come into treatment, and hey, he was broken. He was a kid born with 3 fingers on each hand. That's literally what he had. He had 3 fingers on each hand. And he had come from such humble beginnings, and he had become a Paralympic swimmer, and yet he had destroyed it all and thrown it all away. And I remember the night I wanted to RHT, this guy came and helped me. He was trying to help me, and in that way, I found someone I could actually carry the message to. And I started to talk to him about that book. And in that whole treatment center, there was one big book. And I kind of took possession over it. I mean, I couldn't have that book, it wasn't mine. But I knew where that book was all the time, and I preached that program because I guess deep down inside of me, I knew it was the truth. But why hadn't I applied it to my life? I don't know. I don't have the answers to every question that my mind comes up with. Sometimes what I say doesn't necessarily make sense. Sometimes I might contradict myself, but life's a paradox, really. And so I did a month of treatment, and then I did 9 months in a halfway house in Joburg. And again, I appeared to be very passionate and committed to this program. And I did many meetings, and people looked at me like, wow, Dave's in recovery, and let's ask Dave what he thinks about certain aspects of recovery. It was like, I think I liked this image of being someone who knew about recovery. And yet to explain where I was really at, after 10 months leaving that halfway house, we had to do an hour of step work every Sunday. It was the requirement of the house, as well as meetings and sponsors and so forth. And I went through a few sponsors. But I had to do an hour of step work. And in 9 months, I covered about 2 or 3 resentments in step 4. So the treatment center I'd been in took me to step 3, and in 9 months, I was still right at the beginning of step 4. So what does that say about a guy who's talking about the big book? And, you know, it tells me I was a fraud. It tells me I kind of was incongruent between what I was presenting and what I really believed. And I was actually going to rent an apartment, and my parents suggested that they were going to buy me an apartment. Now, that sounds all very wonderful. And my poor parents, they didn't do it because they had money to throw around. I think they did it out of desperation that this might be something different to try and help Dave. Because they'd tried everything else. My whole life, you know, I went through 2 university dropouts, 2 diploma dropouts, 10 different jobs, psychologists, psychiatrists, you know, And they had always been there to pick up the pieces or to try and help me or to, they kept loving me. They kept loving me. And so they bought me this apartment. And I got to my year clean, and I did a year share at an AA meeting up in Joburg on step 4. I was up to step 4. Really, I'm sitting up there at a podium, funnily enough, and kind of preaching the program to people, and I'm on step 4, and I've been on step 4 for 9 months because I obviously don't believe in the program. I don't know. And a month after that, I relapsed. So I was 13 months sober, and I relapsed. So I wasn't in recovery. I know that today. I was 13 months sober, and the reason I got that time was because I'd been in an institution. So within 3 months of leaving the controlled environment of an institution, I had picked up again. And that was my pattern. I couldn't, it ranged from 3 hours, but the maximum was 3 months that I could control outside of a treatment center before shit hit the fan. So at that point, where was my head at when I picked up? Because it was completely premeditated. I lined up 2 different substances, 2 different kinds of alcohol, and someone had phoned me on my 1 year, will you sponsor me? No, that's too much, Maybe subconsciously I knew I had no message to carry, but I was like, no, that's too much work, I don't want to do that. I had no service positions. I had chosen a sponsor who was easy. So I was really nowhere. But at that point, what was my solution? Well, it obviously wasn't God in the program. See, I know that today. I still somehow believed that the meaninglessness that I felt inside and the emptiness I felt inside because I had no substitute would be filled by drugs and alcohol. I still obviously believed that at that point. And then I went on a spree. And again, I went through desperate lengths to hide the fact that I was drinking again. I stopped going to meetings because I wasn't in an environment like Scottsboro. In Johannesburg, I could fly under the radar much easier. And I would maintain my social engagements with my family, so once a week for lunch and a special occasion or a birthday or something. But I would plan it very carefully. So obviously the day I was seeing my family, I couldn't drink. And I was using at the time as well. And I believe God gave me exactly what I needed because He gave me the time and space and resources to push it as far as I could possibly push it. Because when I started that relapse, I had a lot of money in the bank. I had a new apartment. I had a car and laptop, and I had everything that I thought I needed to be okay. It was like, because I'd never had that before. And it was just a downward spiral. Towards the end, I was literally coming up with any excuse to get money from my parents because now I was having to pay a bond. And I was just, every month I was getting money from my family. And I remember this microwave, I was selling everything I could. And this microwave, I would go to the pawn shop and pawn this microwave for 500 Rand. And then like that scene from Workroom from a Dream, I would come and buy it back. And then 3 weeks later, I'd pawn the microwave again and then buy it back. And I ended up selling clothes just to buy a pint. I was from a guy who had had so much, and 6 months, I basically destroyed everything. I've been trying to get a job. I eventually got a job towards the end. And so I got a salary from that. But I was empty inside. I had no friends. I hated the job I had. I was lying to my family. No fellowship. I disconnected from anyone in the fellowship. And so again, I just had this God-shaped hole inside of me. And then it was Christmas, and my sister had asked me to house sit for her, and I'd actually tried to avoid this because I just knew. And so this kind of control that I thought I had I was losing grip very quickly, and when I house sat for my sister, she had like a full liquor cabinet, and I was alone for 7 days. And it was like one night, it'd be like, it'd be nice to have a whiskey on the rocks, it's very sophisticated. And within a week, like, that liquor cabinet was empty. I had told work that I was sick. I had just orchestrated a week where I literally could barely put on clothes, get out of my pajamas, and it all just it came crumbling apart. And actually, early January, I reached out for help. I actually went to one of our family GPs. He is a dry drunk. He's sober, but he doesn't work a program. And I used to go to him when I needed a sick note or I needed medication. And that day, I kind of poured out my soul to him, and he said, go to a meeting and here's some drugs, some pills. And in that parking lot, it's all kind of a haze, but I phoned a friend who was in recovery. And she came and found me, and her and a couple other people in the fellowship kind of had an intervention in the parking lot, in kind of Santon, in the middle of the morning. And they said, you've got to go to hospital, Dave. So I checked into the Santon Clinic Psych Ward, and I spent 7 days heavily medicated in the Santon Clinic Psych Ward. It was the second time I'd been there. My journey in this fellowship started in that same psych ward in 2008, in January, again, 2008, where I'd had a huge blow-up with my family, and I'd decided not to attend chef school, and I'd had like a rage, alcoholic rage, and so I'd gone to that same psych ward, and the psychiatrist who I met in 2008, she put me on 7 different kinds of medication, tranquilizers, antipsychotics, lithium, you name it. But she said, why don't you attend a meeting? So funnily enough, that was my first contact with this fellowship. And I was back in that same psych ward. So this is January 2016. And in that psych ward, I decided there was something wrong with me. Or rather, I decided the easiest, softer way would to be on medication. That there must be something wrong with me. Because no matter what I've tried, I haven't been able to fill that emptiness inside of me. I still felt like my life was meaningless, and I had no purpose, and I had no direction. I was frustrated, I was unhappy. I couldn't seem, under any circumstances, to find peace, joy, happiness. And so I decided, right, and I made sure I got to see a psychiatrist, and I made sure I got a script. And kind of when the family realized what had happened, because again, my family were out of town, and when they realized what happened, we kind of had an intervention at the hospital. And they said, well, look, you can go back to the house on the hill. You can go to a treatment center in Joburg that your friends have been to, and they seem to think it's pretty good. Or you can go to this other treatment center down on the south coast, not this south coast, Margate South Coast. And I took that option. It was a long-term option. It was a minimum of 6 months stay. And I knew someone who had been there, And she kind of told me about it, and it sounded easy. It sounded like a vacation. It sounded like a break from reality. And to be honest, that's exactly what it was. That's exactly what I could have made it. And so off I went down to Margate. Now the family is traumatized. The family is like, for 6 months, Dave, you've been drinking and you've been lying to us. And I was like, well, isn't it worth something that I tried to keep it together? And they were like, no, you've been lying to us. And someone described it to me as, how would you like it if you found out 6 months later that your girlfriend had been cheating on you? It's like, they were devastated. And I think with that, I hurt them more than I had hurt them before. And I've hurt my family my whole life. Dave, the drunk, hurts people. And because no one wants to be around Dave, the drunk, the people around me are my family, and I hurt them. And I've hurt them. And so off I went to this treatment center with my script. I don't even know what diagnosis I was given. I didn't really care. I just knew I had yummy pills that were going to make life easier. And actually, I didn't have my script with me. Somehow it needed to be delivered or something. And so my first 3 days in this treatment center, I was withdrawing from the medication I'd been given in the hospital. And that wasn't pretty, so I wasn't sleeping well at night, and it was pretty uncomfortable. And then my script came through on the Wednesday. And the Wednesday night, Thursday night, and Friday night, I took my pills. Honestly, don't even know what they were. I don't know what they were. And it was a Saturday the 23rd of January 2016. That whole day, I didn't feel right. I felt like I was buzzing. And I mention this, and it sounds like a joke, but Manchester United lost to West Brom that day. And when West Brom scored, I remember I screamed out, like in quite a weird way, like, in anger or whatever. And I realized, half the people watching the game didn't really care one way or another about the game, and I realized that there wasn't a normal reaction, Dave. And the way I was feeling was not normal. And I didn't feel good. And after dinner that night, I sat down with a friend. His name's Harry. He, English guy. He didn't necessarily want to be in treatment, didn't think he had a problem really, but kind of like I had been many times, kind of wanted to get the family off his back, so he was just doing time. And I sat down with him and I spoke to him for about 2 hours about just where I was at. And he was an angel to me. God worked through him that night, because he just sat there and listened. But in talking to him, things started to make sense. The fog, the cloud that I had been in for, call it 2 weeks, call it 6 months, call it 20, 25 years, that fog seemed to dissipate. And when I went to get my medication that night, I stuck it under my tongue, and I walked off and I spat it out. And I know I've shared about this a few times, but it's very important to me. That night, everyone else had gone to bed and it was raining, and I was standing outside in the rain staring up at this floodlight, and I was literally shouting at God. Well, not shouting, I was talking to God. And I said to him, I can't do this anymore. I said, I don't know what I'm doing. I can't keep being in treatment. I can't, whatever this life is that I'm trying to do, it's not working. So you know what, God, you take my life. If you want me to be a street sweeper, I'll be a street sweeper. It's like I don't know what I'm doing anymore. I need help. I can't carry on like this anymore. And with all my past experiences of being in the house up at the hill 6 times and being in treatment 10, 11 times, I think I finally took step 1. And when I could take step 1, this is just my experience, step 2 and 3 seemed to follow automatically. it was like, well, Dave, the solution is me working through the 12 steps. And for that to happen, you need to hand over and let go of control. Because I've been trying to control everything my whole life. Control my own happiness, control the direction my life was going in. And throughout my life, I'd get to the place that I thought I wanted to be, that I thought was going to make me happy, and I was miserable. That whole attempt to design the perfect life for myself had failed. And I think for the first time I was actually able to at least decide to hand my will and my life over to God. And I slept like a baby that night. And the next day, we went to church. It was my first time I'd been to church in a long time. And the pastor was talking about finding your purpose in life. He said to find your purpose in life, you need 4 things. You need to have passion, you need to have the ability, you need to have life experience, and you need to get positive feedback from other people about this. And I kind of started thinking, well, what is my purpose? And from that moment, I think I began a direction that led me back to this chair. Because I knew my purpose, what I was passionate about, what fit those criteria was encouraging and helping other people. Because throughout all my relapses and throughout all my time in treatment, people had seemed to respond to the encouragement I was giving them. Even though I was carrying a mess, it seemed like I was helping other people. And yeah, it did seem like I was helping other people. And I always enjoyed it, and I always felt right about it. And it always felt right to help other people. And so anyway, that started a direction that led me back here. I was very lucky. I had the time and space, because this treatment center, guys, it was like a holiday camp, really. You could do step work, really, if you wanted to. There was no pressure. If you didn't want to go to church or you didn't want to go to a lecture, you didn't really have to. There's very little consequences. We played a lot of football, we played a lot of volleyball, TV every day, 6-7 hours of TV a day. So I had the time and space, again, to discover what was really going on. And so I did this step 4. Now, the way they do the steps is very unconventional. To give you an example, before you do your step 4, you make a list of your secrets, 20 secrets that you've never told anyone. There has to be 20. And I think you tell your counselor to see if you're ready to take step 4. And I ended up telling my counselor, a guy younger than me, not that that's got actually anything to do with it, these 20 secrets on a bus bench in the middle of South Broome in Margate, wherever, while we were waiting for another patient to see the doctor. And I mean, like these old grannies kind of sitting around us, and I'm talking about like my deepest, darkest kind of secrets. And I mean, it was kind of weird. But anyway, then I could do my step 4. And I did a step 4 out of the big book, out of the green and gold from our sister fellowship. And I poured everything into it. I poured my heart and my soul into it. I did a lot of pages, a lot of books. I had the time, I had the space. I searched so deeply inside of myself, not just the things that I'd done, but how I felt about the world, how I felt about people, my resentments, not only to my family and people I knew, but to institutions and I looked at my prejudices, and I looked at the judgmental side of my nature and the unforgiving side of my nature, and how really where I'd gone wrong in my life. And so it was important for me to have done that step 4 there. And yet the whole time I was talking about that book, like I had before, but I think something had changed. Something had changed in me. I didn't know it at the time. But again, I think there's probably one copy of that book in that whole treatment center. And I just knew. I knew that book was my solution. And normally they get the patients to stay in a halfway house. 6 months is the minimum. Sometimes people stay 18 months, I kid you not. But after 6 months, they suggested, well, Dave, since you seem to like the house on the hill so much, and Caleb had actually been lecturing to the counsellors there, they said, well, why don't you phone them and see if you can go to their halfway house? And so I phoned Don, and I told Don, you know, I seem to believe that my purpose and my passion is in helping people, and so I'd really like to kind of study further in this field, and I thought maybe I could study a bit in Scottsboro and go to the halfway house. And Don said, sure, but Dave, you know, we don't want, I think he spoke to the staff and he said, we don't know what state you're in, so you're going to have to come and do a month of primary so we can check where you're at. And I was like, sure. And then he phoned me back a couple of days later, and I spoke to Caleb, and Caleb was like, look, why don't you stay for 3 months? And he made a plan for me, and it just made sense for me to stay 3 months. And before I started, I had committed to the 3 months. And so I literally had a leaving group at this other treatment center, got on a bus, a minibus, arrived at the house on the hill, and was in a life story, I kid you not, less than 15 minutes later, and I came back to what I knew. I mean, and it wasn't hard for me. It wasn't hard for me to do 9 months of treatment. It really wasn't. It's hard to kind of express like what had changed or what had shifted or what was different. I don't know. Ask God. I can't really say. I think I had given up. I think I had taken step one. I think all the past experiences had led me to a place where I was finally ready to be teachable, to let go of control, willing to go to any lengths, let go of my old ideas. You see, I was so clear about what was going to make me happy, whether it was money or a country or a job or a woman. It was so clear what was going to make me happy. And for the first time in my life, I realized I had absolutely no idea what was going to make me happy. And so I surrendered that control of my life. And it's funny, the same counselor that suggested I phone Don actually suggested that I should study psychology as well. And so he was kind of the guy that got me interested in psychology. And so I came back and I did my 3 months and I went to the halfway house, and things were different. But I think Caleb knew that I needed to get out of treatment. I could do treatment very well. I present very well. Like I said, the lengths I'll go to get what I want. And all my previous experiences in treatment had always been a compliance to get what I wanted. And so Caleb needed to see what I was like outside of treatment. So I only did 3 months in the halfway house. I literally left as I got my 1 year. And I moved into my own apartment. And even for myself, and it's nice because I can see that I was actually in a state of, I don't like to say I was humble, but in a state of not knowing where I was even at. Because I was very nervous those 3 months. Am I going to be okay? Are things different? But you know what? Not only had I actually taken the steps, but I did the things we're suggested to do and more. So obviously meetings and sponsor and service and God. But also I started sponsoring people, and I started to go out of my way to do service in areas that I haven't done service before. I started to believe that I needed to enlarge on my spiritual life. I guess for the first time I realized that the only thing that would fill that God-shaped hole was God. And the way I find God is through those 12 steps. I couldn't find him any other way. It doesn't matter what my religion is, and I am religious. It doesn't matter, because if I'm drunk, I'm useless to God. This program must come first. I have to stay sober before I can do anything else. But basically, I started to do the things I didn't want to do. And I got a job, and I had sworn that I would never work in a kitchen again because I was so bitter and resentful at being a chef. And yet, God worked through people, like he has my whole life and through my whole recovery. God worked through people to get me the job I have today. And I've got a small little business. It's not very big, and it's been perfect for me. I'm my own boss. I work at my own pace under my own conditions, and yet I'm around people the whole day. I'm being of service to people the whole day. I have to practice my program at work every day. I work at a retirement village, and I'm dealing with the elderly all day. And sometimes it's amusing and hilarious, and sometimes it's tragic. But and sometimes I'm patient and accepting, and sometimes I'm judgmental and irritable. But it's the best job I've ever had in my life. I used to be so filled with fear every time I went to work. I don't have that feeling at all. Actually most of the time, I kind of forget what day it is, because I don't really mind whether I'm working or not, because I don't really mind going to work. I'm good at what I do, and I enjoy what I do, and I'm so grateful that God has positioned me in this place for now, where I can be self-sustaining. And I am self-sustaining. And through that, I enrolled at UNISA, and now I'm in my 3rd year of a psychology degree, and I love it. And people ask me, why are you doing it, Dave? I thought I knew. Today I'm not so sure, but it doesn't matter. I absolutely 100% believe God has a plan for my life. There's a reason why I'm doing it, and it's not about the destination, it's about the journey. And I'm loving the journey. I'm enjoying what I'm studying. I realize that I'm fascinated by people and human behavior, and that understanding, I believe, one day will make me more effective in helping other people in whatever capacity it comes, just as a sponsor or whatever capacity it might come. But I'm loving what I'm studying, and I'm excelling at it. And that's brought so much happiness to my family, which is just one small side benefit of it. I mean, everything I've done in the last 3 years has been about amends. And it's so nice to be able to say that things have changed. The action I've put in all the areas of my life, working these steps through the program, every area of my life seems to have changed. And the time is testament to that. There's no agenda anymore. There's no motive anymore. There's nothing like a secret, I want to get to a place so I can get what I want. It's like I'm flowing with the path God is leading for me. And I'm cool with it. I really am. And I'm enjoying it. It gives me freedom. It gives me peace, because I'm not having to control anymore. And when things don't go my way, I don't have to be so disappointed anymore. It's like if things don't go the way I expected, it's like, thy will be done. Like it says in that book many times, thy will be done. And I'm living that way to the best of my ability. I'm not Gandhi, but I'm living that way to the best of my ability. And I know it's what I've been looking for my whole life. This is what I've been searching for, I could say, since I was 18 and I first started believing in God. I could say since I was born. Because I know today I was born an alcoholic. Because this isn't about the substance. It's about me, my spiritual void, and a behavioral manifestation of that spiritual void, searching for something to give myself meaning and fulfillment. So I do believe today I was born an alcoholic. And I believe God's positioned me perfectly where He wants me today. And there have been so many other wonderful gifts of recovery I can tell you about. I go home to my family 3 times a year, and things are better than they've ever been before. It's as simple as that. The relationships are better and more sincere and more genuine, because I'm not filled with guilt and shame or worried about what they're going to ask me or have a motive and an agenda for being around them. It's just, I believe the right thing to do is to be a good son and to build relationships with my family. And then when I do it, I realize, well, I actually kind of enjoy it and it's nice, but like I'm just doing the next right thing. Silly things like exercise. Now, that shouldn't really be a factor, but it was kind of the right thing to do. It's like, well, is sitting on the couch and eating 20 chocolates the right thing to do? Something inside of me tells me no. I don't know, that's just me. Something inside of me has always said, well, Dave, maybe a healthy body, healthy mind might be a good thing. So I've exercised constantly throughout my recovery. I'm reading more. I'm trying to expand kind of my outlook on life. Everything starts with this program, but it's kind of allowed me to expand my life outwards. And I'm loving like reading books on philosophy and psychology and great pieces of literature and the things I end up watching on YouTube. Like I watched something this morning. Do you know for the first time in America's history for the last 150 years, the life expectancy has dropped for the 2nd year in a row. So So it went upwards for 150 years, and it's dropped the last 2 years. And that's because of two factors. One is opioid fatal overdoses, and the other is suicide. Because there's like this void of meaning. I think people have lost faith in religion, and people don't know what to believe in anymore. And that's why I love this program. It's my anchor, it's my hope. It connects me to God, and it gives my life purpose and meaning moving forward into the world, whatever direction that might be. My life's not perfect, but there's more going on for me today than in the rest of my life combined. I try to sponsor people, I try to maintain my service. I do the same things today that I did when I left the halfway house. And it works for me, and I enjoy it. Sometimes I have to go against my head, but most of the time I do it because I want to. I like the routine I have in my life. I like the patterns. I love living in Scottburgh. For a guy who couldn't wait to escape Scottburgh, my perception has changed, everything has changed. I'm happy here living in Scottburgh. And yet I allow God to direct my life. I wanted to purchase property here, but God worked through my family, and I'm just going to hold off on that idea. But it doesn't mean I don't want to live in Scottburgh. It just means, wait a sec, Dave, don't rush into anything. What I mean is I don't really mind what happens. I'm just going with this and doing what I need to do one day at a time. I love the direction my life is heading in. I guess I could go on, and I've kind of gone about this a strange way, and I hope it made sense. If it didn't, please come speak to me, guys. I'm always around. If there's a huge part of my story which actually doesn't make sense, I'm always here to chat, guys. But I will leave it there. Thanks for letting me share.